I didn't lose my life to drugs in a dramatic way. I lost it quietly, one ordinary day at a time, and that's what scares me the most when I look back. My name is Stephen. I'm 72 years old, and it has taken me this long to admit how much drugs really took from me, not just the obvious things, but the parts of myself I barely noticed slipping away. I grew up believing that as long as you kept moving, kept working, kept showing up on the surface, you were doing fine. Feelings weren't something we examined back then. If you felt restless or empty, you didn't name it, you buried it under responsibility or distraction. When drugs entered my life, they didn't feel dangerous. They felt useful. They made me quieter inside. They made the days feel smoother, less sharp around the edges. And for a long time, I mistook that for balance, that I wasn't reckless in the way people imagine. I held jobs. I paid bills. I showed up to gatherings when I had to. That became my proof that I was still in control. I told myself that addiction was loud and destructive, and since my life still looked mostly intact, I couldn't possibly be that far gone. What I didn't understand then was that drugs don't always take your life by wrecking it. Sometimes they take it by narrowing it. Slowly, without announcing themselves, my days became smaller. I stopped looking forward to things. I stopped being curious. Conversations felt like chores instead of connections. I laughed when it was expected, listened just enough to respond, and spent most of my time waiting for the next moment I could retreat back into numbness. I didn't call it emptiness. I called it being tired. There were people who noticed changes before I did. Or maybe I noticed and chose not to see what they were seeing. Someone would ask if I was okay, and I'd answer too quickly. Someone would invite me somewhere, and I'd find an excuse that sounded reasonable. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was trying to avoid myself. And the more I avoided myself, the harder it became to show up honestly for anyone else. Drugs took my attention first. They took my ability to sit through discomfort and let it teach me something. Any moment that felt awkward, boring, or emotionally heavy became something to escape from instead of move through. Over time, I forgot that feelings are supposed to pass on their own. I trained myself to interrupt them. And in doing that, I dulled not just the pain, but the joy too. There's a memory that still feels unfinished to me. I was supposed to meet someone I loved. Nothing serious, nothing dramatic. Just time together. I didn't go. Not because I was incapable, but because the effort of being fully present felt exhausting. I told myself I'd call later, explain later, make it right later. Later became my favorite word. It asked nothing of me in the moment. But later has a way of turning into never, and that relationship quietly slipped out of my life. What surprises me now is how long I lived without feeling strong guilt. I didn't wake up ashamed every day. I woke up numb. Life felt flat, like the contrast had been turned down. I convinced myself this was just adulthood, that this was what growing older felt like. But deep down, there was a steady, uncomfortable awareness that I was missing my own life while it was happening. Years passed that way. I didn't crash. I didn't hit some dramatic bottom. I just stayed suspended. I did enough to survive, enough to avoid consequences that would force change, and in doing that, I lost something harder to name. I lost depth. I lost time that could have been full instead of merely occupied. When I finally stopped using drugs, it wasn't because of a single event. It was exhaustion. I was tired of managing myself, tired of lying by omission, tired of waking up with the same quiet regret that never quite turned into action. Stopping didn't bring instant peace. If anything, it made things louder. Feelings returned without warning. Memories I had kept at a distance came rushing back. Time felt heavier when I was fully awake inside it. But something else returned too. Awareness. I started noticing mornings again. The sound of the house. The weight of silence. The way conversations change when you're actually listening instead of waiting for them to end. I also started noticing what couldn't be repaired. Trust that had been stretched too thin. Relationships that had moved on without me. Years that existed now only as fragments. At 72, I understand that drugs didn't just take my health or my opportunities. They took my honesty with myself. They took my willingness to feel uncomfortable long enough to grow. They took moments that could have shaped me more deeply if I had been present for them. That's the loss I didn't admit for most of my life. I don't tell this story with hatred for my past self. I know now that I was coping the only way I knew how at the time. That can be true, and it can also be true that the cost was higher than I was willing to see. Age has taught me that regret doesn't have to punish you. It can clarify you. If you're listening to this and you recognize that quiet shrinking of your world, that habit of escaping instead of facing, I won't tell you what to do. I'll only tell you what I wish I had understood sooner. Numbness feels safe, but it charges interest. And the bill comes due in time you can't get back. I'm Stephen, 72 years old, and drugs took more from me than I ever admitted. But they didn't take everything. I still have the ability to be present, to speak honestly, and to live whatever time I have left with my eyes open. And now, finally, that feels like something worth protecting.